Hi, Eva.
Board of Directors meeting, we had our two directors that currently are up for renewal is Donna Blair and Janine Caprillion. They both volunteered to do it again, so yay. So they'll be on the ballot. And I got a text from our wonderful treasurer, Janelle Buckland, and she's willing to do it again for another 2 years. The president, Tim, has been the president for 2 terms, and that's the total number of times that our bylaws allows. So we are looking for a volunteer for a president to lead our organization. So any of you out there would like to be the president, great. Please volunteer yourself or someone else or suggest someone. So if you have any suggestions or if you'd like to be the president, you could raise your hand. Oh, I don't see anybody raising their hand yet. Or you can email to us at humblebeekeepers@gmail.com, or you can call any one of the board of directors. Hopefully you can get, oh, there's John. He's raising his hand.
No, not to be president.
Oh, no, you can't renege.
I was just gonna ask everybody if they could mute their Zoom, because we're picking up a lot of, at least I'm hearing a lot of stuff coming in. So that's all I'm asking for.
Okay.
And
Being
I'm
the
not ready
president.
for it.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah, we almost got you.
You sound
It's
very
not a hard job.
presidential.
I'm sorry.
Back to where I was.
Oh, I said John sounds very presidential.
He does. I think that's a good trait. So maybe we should just induct him as our president. We get to vote next month. And so you have a whole month that you can join. Only members who are paid up for 2021 can vote. And it's $20 to be an individual member with 1 vote. If you want to join as a family, you get 2 votes. So that's $25. And you can join on our website and pay via PayPal, or you can also send a check if you still use those paper things, and send it to our PO box. And I put that information in the chat room, so you can use that. It's also on our website. In June, we can accept nominations from the floor, and that's about it. Does anybody have any questions? If I have one more point, if you want to know what the duties are of the president, it's in the bylaws section on the website, so you can read it. It's very minimal. It's not a lot. We have 2 meetings a month. One is the board of directors and this meeting. Easy peasy. Any questions? All right. I also want to remind people that we have the HCBA swag that's still for sale. We've had a few sales this month, and we have canvas totes. We have gray hoodies and baseball style t-shirts that are available with our HCBA logo. And wanted to mention that John Winsler may or may not be our speaker next month. Is that right, John?
That's where we are.
That's correct.
Okay, on Honeybee Anatomy.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, good. So don't forget to mark your calendar for next June. So we have an election and a great lecture for John. And we also have a fundraiser from Eureka Natural Foods. They've they've chosen the Bee Club, like they have done in the past, to be the organization for Change, which is a rounding up at the register. And when they did it for us a couple of years ago, we were able to receive around $2,500, something like that, for the week for both stores. I don't know if they're going to do both stores. So we would like to have volunteers. If COVID allows, they would wish for us to have a table like we've had before. with a human being there, if possible, talking to the people that come and go. And that usually helps keep people's positive ideas at the cash register to round up. And some people donate money in the jar where the people are sitting, and you get to talk to a lot of people. It's a fun event for people to volunteer. So you can send your interest to the Humboldt Beekeepers at gmail.com to volunteer for that. And in June, we'll have more of a better idea of what day specifically in August that they have chosen for us to do it. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 days, and I'm not really sure. I think the week that we did it last time was like Saturday through Saturday. So we had a lot of opportunity to have people donate their.
You said Humboldt Beekeepers at gmail.com?
Yeah, Humboldt Beekeepers at gmail.com. And I think Tim opens that up and Janelle opens that email up too. I'm not sure who else has access to that. I guess that's really all I have to say about business. John, do you have any more announcements to make that perhaps that I missed from our general meeting? I mean, our board of directors meeting?
No, I think you have everything covered. I would encourage people to participate in the board. If we want to keep this entity running at the level that it is running, and I think it's pretty good for a small bee club, some of the speakers and programs we've had, we need people to step up and kind of help. And it's not particularly onerous to do this, but it does take, a couple hours a month in a meeting and a little bit of follow-up. So that's all I really have to add to this.
Thank you. It's an enjoyable group of people to work with. Everybody's nice. And when we meet in person, we bring treats, and we usually meet at the Ag Center, and that's really a nice place to meet. So please really consider it. We really need some variety of human beings and ideas. So don't be shy. Please think about being the president. Okay, so Cheryl, is Janine here yet? Baloney.
Oops, I just clicked the button for
Yeah,
her
she
to
is.
get on.
Yeah, Janine's here.
Okay.
Janine, could you start your part of the program today by introducing David Giuliano?
I'll talk to you later then. Let's see, there you are. Okay, bye.
I see Janine's name here, but her microphone is muted.
Hi, I was having trouble I was in the waiting room.
Oh, hey. Hey, Janine.
Glad to be able to join.
Thank you for coming. So take it, Janine.
Okay, so we're very fortunate to have David Giuliano here today. He's the Senior Agricultural Inspector for Humboldt County, and he is a true friend of beekeepers. David took the HSU beekeeping class a number of years ago and has furthered his apiary inspection skills by taking hands-on classes with the state apiarist David Stoffel for county officials. David is very approachable. He quickly responds to questions by beekeepers, and he knows where to find the answers. David is here tonight to talk about his role in keeping small hive beetle and American Foulbrood under control in Humboldt County. So thank you for being here. And is David here?
I am here.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks for the introduction, Janine. So those of you that don't know me, I'm David Giuliano. I'm Senior Agricultural Inspector for Humboldt County Department of Agriculture. And I, in addition to many other duties, I have the apiary program for the county. So a big part of what we do is deal with any pest and disease issues that crop up. Last fall, it was small hive beetle. And hopefully we haven't heard any further problems with that this spring. We hope that we did catch it and stop it at the point where it came in, and that we won't be having any problems until it shows up again from some other source. But I would encourage everybody to make themselves aware of small hive beetle, what it looks like, what the signs in the hive of beetle infestation look like, and just, you know, be vigilant when you're checking your hives. It's easy to miss. They are quite tiny, probably about like a fifth the size of a bee. So they're easily missed, but it's just good when inspecting the hives, know what you're looking for. And if you do, I'm sorry?
Sorry, I'm being loud.
If you do get something that you think may be small hive beetle, you can send pictures if you can get it, or bring in a sample to our office and I can certainly take a look at it. You know, part of the service that we do. Then beyond the small hive beetle, we have had another case of American Foulbrood. That is an ongoing issue, especially in the Blue Lake area. We know it is in wild hives. So it's endemic in the county and it's going to reoccur periodically. It's going to crop up. I'm sure most of you are familiar with signs of American Foulbrood. It is a devastating bee disease, as we'll see in the upcoming video. And as a result, it is something we're very concerned about. Right now, the Beltsville lab is really behind on things. The turnaround time is very slow. We still have not heard back from the sample that we sent in. What is that, Janine? Probably 3 weeks now, I want to say. You're still muted. So we do have the quick tests for in-field use. They are not kind of the final word, but in the absence of fast turnaround at Beltsville, it's kind of the best thing we have. So again, vigilance when you're checking your hives, know what to look for. If you get anything suspect for AFB, please contact our department. You can bring in a frame, a suspect frame, or I can come out and test in the field, whatever works. We do have fresh kits, field test kits that we got. Again, the quick test is not 100% accurate, but it's far better than guessing. And right now with Beltsville, it's pretty much the best thing we have. So I don't know, Janine, did you want me to go over small hive beetle? I have that short PowerPoint.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do have a American Foulbrood and you don't have a burn site by your apiary, do you just bag up everything and then take it to a specific site to burn it all?
It's best to burn on site, but understandably that's not always possible. Yeah, I mean, we can help facilitate if needed. You know, if you don't know somebody that does have a burn pile that you can use, you know, you need to dig it. You need to dig a hole, put it in, burn it, cover it over.
Right, something to think about. I know a lot of people don't have spot, like my main apiary is not on my property.
Yeah.
So if I ever had an outbreak, and I have a lot of extra wood because I use WBC hives. But yeah, I don't know where I would take it.
Yeah, it is a problem. I mean, with sudden oak death stuff, we've sometimes had to burn in our back parking lot. Same kind of thing. We just don't there isn't a better place to do it.
Right.
Just a question, and you probably would need a burn permit and everything else from Cal Fire or from the local department, and you couldn't just burn in your backyard without getting a permit. And
Right.
that's not easy to get a permit during fire season.
We can help facilitate that. I've dealt with air quality board about getting burn permits in cases specifically to American Foulbrood and also for sudden oak death. When it comes from our end regulatory side and we're kind of oversight, it helps.
That's what I was leading to.
Yeah.
To help with that.
So that is something else our department can request and help facilitate getting a burn permit.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, David. AFB is a reportable disease by state law, right?
Yeah.
And so you're the one we report to.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just, does it stop there at the county level or does it go beyond you, or what does that exactly mean?
It's known in the county. So
Okay.
it's nothing, if we were to have a widespread outbreak, we would probably get the state involved to help deal with it. We're a small department. But as far as, what was that? I think 27 different hives that had AFB. We were able to deal with that ourselves.
Okay, so Gavin Newsom's not going to call me up. Have a chat.
We hope not.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, as John was saying, because of how severe the disease is, that's actually the only, when you talk about reportable, it is required under state law that American Foulbrood be dealt with because it can spread very rapidly and just devastate, widespread devastation of apiaries. So that is something that, we have regulatory authority for that disease. Eradication, but most beekeepers, if they get it, they're wanting to stop it, so it's generally not an issue.
This is Mary. Question: can you walk us through what that process would look like if someone suspected they had a problem? Let's say it's the weekend. What exactly would one do? Call a phone number, send an email, wait till Monday?
On a weekend, yeah. Probably contact other beekeepers that and kind of get them involved. Certainly, call my office, leave a message, or shoot an email. If there is something major, somebody's going to get word to me even on a weekend. But yeah, the sooner that we are able to assess the situation, the better it's going to be. Any other questions?
Okay.
Janine, do you want to run the webinar portion and then
I think
kind of
that
go back
that
to
would
questions
be,
afterwards?
I think that would be wise. We have a 18-minute video. It's a portion of the webinar called Brooding Over Brood. Actually, let me see, where's my notes here? Yes, Brooding About Brood Diseases with Dan Wines, that was produced by the Bee Informed Partnership, which is an excellent site for information. We're going to have Dr. Alina Nino here to join us, our expert on bee diseases, at 6:45. So I'm hoping that people will write their questions for Dr. Elena Nino in the chat while we're watching the video. She's going to be with us for 45 minutes, and this is very precious time that she's donating to us. So I think I'm going to try to put that on. Will you be able to stay on too?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you, David, for coming.
Mm-hmm. You're very welcome.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Let me know if it's working.
Dan Wines from Michigan.
So looked like we had most folks were seeing that American Foulbrood, kind of the most serious, but thankfully relatively uncommon these days. It is a bacterial brood disease, Panabacillus larvae. You kind of see, we'll get into more of the visual signs, but this kind of close up on some brood here shows a few of the things you'll see in an infected colony. One thing at the top to note, it is in some jurisdictions, it is a notifiable disease. It means if you do find it in one of your colonies, you may be obligated to report it and follow very particular regulations as far as how it's dealt with. But that is largely on a state-by-state basis. So as a beekeeper, it is your obligation to know, local and state beekeeping laws, and particularly as they pertain to American Foulbrood. As a disease, it is generally fatal if the beekeeper does not intervene. That's kind of why we consider it the most serious of the diseases. There's persistent spores. It's a bacteria that forms spores, and they remain viable for decades. It's extremely infectious. It only takes something on the order of about 10 spores to infect a larvae. And at the end, after the bacteria has fully consumed a larvae, it produces millions of spores. So its kind of magnification is very high. And that's why it's, it is serious. It needs to be taken seriously and dealt with. It's pretty, because of these spores being persistent in hive material, it's pretty easily spread through colonies, just through normal beekeeping work, moving from hive to hive with the hive tool, hands, gloves, things like that, or just beekeeping drift. So just through routine basic operations, it can be spread. So we can go to the next slide, and we'll look a little bit here about the biology of it. I said it is a spore forming bacteria. The infection occurs when a young larvae gets fed infected brood food. The spores germinate inside the larval midgut. The gut lining then eventually ruptures, and the infection spreads to all of the tissues in the larvae. Death typically occurs right around the point of capping, just as it's transitioning from larvae to pupa, kind of in that pre-pupa stage, give or take. There's a little variation in timing, but generally speaking, it's right at the point of capping. The larval breakdown continues after this point, and this is when kind of the bacteria transitions from its vegetative state to spore formation. And the adult bees can carry the spores on them, but they're not impacted. So that's why we say it's a brood disease. It doesn't impact the adult bees, but they are carriers. They can potentially be vectors of those spores within the hive, but also to other hives if it's foraging, drift robbing, things like that. So we can move on to the next slide, and that will start to look at kind of the recognition and diagnosis here. As you're opening your colony, what are you going to be looking for? Initial infection of a colony is just going to be present in a couple cells. One of the things beekeepers talk about with Foulbrood is a smell. It will, as it progresses and there's a lot of larval death, there will be kind of a general smell of decay. I've heard it described a lot of different ways, and because of that, I don't really like to use it as a diagnostic, because I've I've heard it described 10 different ways, and everybody's sensory, perception is different. So the smell is not really a reliable diagnostic, but if you do smell something off, it's just kind of a clue to be looking for there, a little extra vigilance. But as the infestation progresses, or infection, the population of the colony is going to dwindle. You're going to see a very spotty brood pattern. We kind of see a little bit of that here, where it's very shotgun looking. There's mixed age classes amongst the brood. The two primary things that I look for, these kind of highlighted in bold here, are the sunken perforated capping. Sometimes they look greasy or wet. They've got holes chewed in them. As you can see, there's a variety here circled in red that just kind of show this kind of torn look. Those, as you're doing a brood inspection as a beekeeper, that should really get your attention. You want to look closer at those cells. The other thing that really catches my eye and points me toward American Foulbrood is kind of this melted, slumped, just kind of a brown, smooth material. It's kind of got a silky, liquidy texture to it. Get a caramel color, latte color. So if you're seeing that, these two things that are kind of highlighted there, those are things you're really going to want to pay attention to and look further. We'll talk about how to do some testing here in a few minutes. And then as the disease progresses further, as these kind of liquid, they dry down to a scale, which can be quite hard to see. We have some photos coming up here in a minute that'll kind of show you what that looks like, but it's generally not the first thing you're going to see. And once a colony has a lot of scale, it's progressed fairly far in the disease. Another thing to talk about is the pupil tongue, and we'll show some pictures. That is a visual sign that is unique to American Foulbrood, but not often present. So not the primary diagnostic, but we do have some pictures of it that we'll explain. So we can go to the next slide and we'll see some more kind of close-up look at some of these pictures. Again, on the left here, just kind of a shot of a pretty good sized chunk of brood, and you just see a lot of different things present here. We see torn cappings, we see sunken cappings. There's a lot of kind of greasy looking or moisture condensation as these larvae are breaking down under the capping. Some are getting opened up, some haven't been opened up yet, but that's, if you see that in a colony, that's a very advanced infection that's really progressed. Here we kind of see on the right, in the close-up in the texture of what you're looking at there, it's just kind of melted down into a light brown, caramel colored sort of liquid goo. It's got a little viscosity to it, but it's pretty thin. It's not generally very gummy or dry. You can move on to the next few pictures. And again, this one is further drying on the left here. It's kind of zoomed in. It's not quite a scale yet, but it's getting very close to it. Its color's darkened a little, it's sunk further. And then the photo on the right, we see the scale. And on the bottom of the cells. Now this is, as a beekeeper, if you're inspecting for scale and you hold the frame as you normally would for a brood inspection, you're probably not going to see it because it is down kind of flush on the floor of the cells. So you want to hold the frame kind of with the bottom away from you, so you're looking and you can see the bottom of the cells, and you'll get kind of a glint of those scales. So that's something to look for. Generally, if you've got a colony with scales, you're going to see these other symptoms, and I personally find it much easier to see the torn, sunken cappings and the kind of melted larvae. But this is something to be aware of, particularly in old equipment, used equipment, inspecting dead outs and things like that, where there's not a lot of brood to look at. Looking for scale in the cell bottoms is an important thing to do. So we can move on, and we will look at, this is one I mentioned, the pupil tongue. This one gets a lot of confusion, and it's the reason I put up both of these pictures. So this picture on the left is the pupil tongue. That is a pupa that's succumbed to American Foulbrood. It's got that characteristic color, and that vertical little kind of triangle at the top there is the proboscis, the tongue. Not very common. Why I wanted to include it is get a lot of people saying, oh, I have dead bees with their tongues out. That's AFB. That is not AFB. This picture on the right is bees that died from another cause. In this picture, it was pesticides, but bees die looking like this from, could be starvation, could be chilled, neglected in a dwindling colony. So when you see an adult bee, fully formed head and things like that, that dies with its tongue out, that can indicate any number of things, but it is not indicative of American Foulbrood. So just to distinguish between those two, tongues out does not mean AFB. Pupil tongue is a very distinct visual presentation there. So now, as far as we've talked about the visual, we can move on and kind of, say a lot of the diagnosis of this is just going to be eyeball inspection. Thankfully, it is one that we can see. Moving to kind of confirming what we think we found. The simplest, most common way I usually test for, I find this to be easy and reliable test, is we call it the Ropey Test. You'll hear it called matchstick test, ropiness, things like that. Basically, you take one of these and suspected infected cells with this brown kind of silky liquid in it, and you're going to poke a matchstick, a twig, in this case, a popsicle stick, coffee stick, something wooden, something that's not real slippery, so this liquid can adhere. And then if you draw it out just gently, it'll rope out in a nice smooth string like that. It should rope out to at least 2 centimeters, so nearly an inch. Sometimes you'll get other larval death and you'll have kind of a liquidy substance that'll rope a little, but it won't get anywhere near this length or the smoothness. So if you poke something in and bring it out and it ropes out to near an inch, that's a pretty confident diagnosis of American Foulbrood. So that's one I like to use. We can move on to the next. There is now kind of an upgraded capability. In the last handful of years, these test kits have become fairly widely available at a variety of beekeeping supply companies. Most anyone carries them. They make them for both AFB and EFB. They are separate kits, so depending on what you're trying to confirm, but it can be a pretty good thing as a beekeeper to have at your disposal. They're pretty reasonably priced. They typically last for about 1.5 years or 2 years when I get them. That's how long for the expiration date. It's almost similar. You're going to find, again, that suspect larvae. You scoop it out. This kit contains everything, including instructions. So this is a simplified, kind of explanation. But essentially, you scoop out a suspect larvae, put it in a little solution bottle with a stainless steel agitator BB, shake it around for 20 seconds. They include a little pipette, and you put a drop of the resulting liquid on the circular well of this test plate. And it takes 20 to 30 seconds. The moisture will kind of seep across that rectangular viewing window, and that will tell you the result. You should always get at least one of the bars on the bottom. You see there that one bar. That's the control bar that indicates it's a valid test, and it's reliable. On the top, if you see that second bar that's filled in at the left, that indicates that's your test strip or your test indicator. And there with the 2 bars, that indicates a positive test. Even if it's faint, it is. If you see any hint of a second bar there, it is a positive test. You have confirmed American Foulbrood. So I like these. I use them when in doubt. There is one more method available. We can move on, and that is just to say the USDA Bee Research Lab in Beltsville, Maryland will test samples. I didn't bother writing in the website here because it's quite an extensive URL. But if you just search USDA Beltsville Bee Lab, BRL for Bee Research Lab, you'll find their website, services available. They have sampling and shipping instructions. It's all there. They will, again, test for EFB and AFB. It does tend to take a little while, one just with the shipping and getting it to them, and then depending on their workload and how long. So it's not something I typically do for AFB because of the seriousness of it. I feel like it needs to be dealt with immediately. I don't want to wait a week or more on a result. I want to know and I want to deal with it. One nice feature of this, though, that the Bee Research Lab does do is they will test for antibiotic resistance if they do find the sample you send is positive for AFB. So that is nice. It is something we'll talk a little bit about antibiotics here in a minute. But resistance is a concern. There is some AFB that has been found resistant to antibiotics. So that service is available. Now that we've kind of talked about the diagnostic part of it, we can move on to kind of response and treatment. If you do confirm a colony with American Foulbrood, couple things you want to do. First, we'll talk about what you want to do at the colony level. And again, this may be, you may not have a choice in this. This may be regulated depending on where physically your bees are, what state, and the regulations within that state. So you want to know that. First, and the thing I do and have done is to burn the colonies. It's not pleasant, but we've talked about how contagious this disease is, and I'm of the mindset of better to burn one today than a dozen tomorrow. It does spread. It is a problem. It does not go away on its own. So that is one method. There's lots of instructions on how to do this if you find yourself in this scenario. Honey does not burn particularly well, so typically you want to burn in a hole and then bury a couple feet deep so there's not remnant honey that's going to get robbed out. Anything that could contain spores, if it's not completely burned to ash, needs to be buried. Another method is beekeepers call it shook swarm or frame exchange. This basically involves shaking the bees off onto brand new comb and feeding them, and then feeding them.
Oops.
The springtime, it would be beneficial to have screen bottom boards on your colonies, not only for Varroa, but
Sorry.
yes, that would align with increasing the ventilation.
I'm not sure what happened.
Address these in a later blog post, I believe Net mentioned. We have a.
All right. Well, as Annette said, thank you very much for being here. My name is Anne-Marie Fauval, and I'm the tech.
I will try to get that again. Technology.
Maybe this would be a good time for anybody to ask a question, since we have David here. Does anybody have a question so far?
I do have a question. And that's dealing with if let's say you had a hive that a dead out that had American Foulbrood, but you didn't know it, and then and you cleaned it up as far as anything that looked, and bees moved into it next year, would bees move in, or would they sense there's something wrong?
I think that's a better question for Dr. Nino to address. I'm not really sure the answer on that.
Okay, fair enough.
Write those questions in the chat.
I had a question, David. It's a brood disease, so is there any effect on the queen or the workers? Does the queen continue to lay eggs, and does the brood continue to hatch out and spores be spread throughout the hive?
It doesn't affect the adult bees. I don't know as far as if the queen will continue laying, but it devastates the brood.
Okay. So if she's laying eggs, the brood will become infected and it'll just the whole hive will die, right?
Yeah, by definition, Chris, I think, I'm not the final authority on this, but it is a brood disease. It just affects the brood.
Yes,
And
I get
so
that part.
the adults feed the brood, the spores germinate in their gut, kills the brood. So in time, the colony just dwindles.
Okay.
Okay, and so the queen can keep laying, but in time, if there aren't any workers to take care of the queen and the rest of the brood, then it's a.
I'm in a meeting.
Okay. That seems reasonable. Good logic. Thank you.
Well, I have a question because the video cut out right at this one thing that was about to be answered, and I didn't get the answer. See, I'm a beginner and a beekeeper. I've been doing this for about 2.5 years. Love it. I've got, well, mixed results. It goes up and down. But now, bacteriologically, that's scary. That's way scarier than vermin. Vermin, I can figure out. They got a certain growth pattern. Bacteria is much more scary. Now, if it's going through the brood, the worker bees, the nurse bees, all these bees are being exposed to it. They got it on their feet. They're licking stuff up. I can't see how the adult bees aren't being infected by this. I mean, maybe it's killing the brood, but they're carriers, and any hive they go into contact with. So it sounds like once you get this thing, and it seems like a far reach to try to treat it with antibiotics, you're just going to have to bury your hive, trash your whole hive. Because is that what they were getting at? He was, I didn't even think about the fact that honey doesn't burn, and that's why the burying. But then some people, now this is where the video ended. Some people shake the hive into another hive, and the first thing I'm going is, yeah, but they got all this stuff on their feet, right? And then the video cut out. So what happens next? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What's the whole? I personally would be afraid of keeping the bees exposed to such a thing. But what's the story?
That is not an approved treatment in the state of California because it's not a guarantee it's going to work. And you can end up just infecting the rest of your hives, neighboring hives, and spread it, widespread. So burning an infective hive is the only approved treatment. Antibiotic treatments for the other hives that are not infected is a preventive that can save them from getting infected. But once they're infected, the antibiotics are not able to get through to the brood in time to save them. So it's just not effective in a hive, not effective in a hive that is already infected. But it's a preventive treatment for hives. If you have one hive that goes down with AFB and you burn that, you start treating your other hives with terramycin or tylosine, that's the recommended way. So looks like Janine's got the video ready.
It does spread. It is a problem. It does not go away on its own. So that is one method. There's lots of instructions on how to do this if you find yourself in this scenario. Honey does not burn particularly well. So typically you want to burn in a hole and then bury a couple feet deep so there's not remnant honey that's going to get robbed out. Anything that could contain spores, if it's not completely burned to ash, needs to be buried. Another method is beekeepers call it shook swarm or frame exchange. This basically involves shaking the bees off onto brand new comb and feeding them, and then feeding them antibiotics, and then again still burning that contaminated equipment. You're not going to be able to sterilize frames and things like that. So you do want to, with the infected colony, that is another option to kind of save the bees, destroy the equipment. Not going to be a viable option late in the season. That colony still got to have enough time to build up and make some strength. So depending on where you're at and what you may be allowed to do and what time of year, you have a couple different options. So that's what you want to do with an infested colony. This next slide talks about at the apiary level. If you found AFB in any colony in an apiary, that apiary kind of becomes now a red flag. You want to treat every colony in that yard with antibiotics. You want to, any equipment or something that may have had contact wants to be sterilized. You can do that with fire. Generally, at large scale, things can get sent for irradiation. Boxes can get wax dipped. They do need about a 10-minute submersion at 160 Celsius. So pretty serious thing we're trying to destroy here, and not to be taken lightly with the kind of the cleanup aspect of what you're going to do after the fact. But again, if you're destroying infected colonies and treating all those in the yard, and then you do want to kind of quarantine that infected apiary where you found it. Nothing, minimize what comes into the yard, certainly what goes out of the yard. You may want dedicated hive tools and things like that. But certainly no hive material, boxes, woodware, anything like that should be leaving that yard for probably a couple of years, until you've been through and inspected several times and had no further positive diagnosis. And then just to close here, because I have talked about antibiotics, and it's going to come up in the next section as well. As far as treating antibiotics, they do recently, as of about 3 years ago, they do require either a prescription from a veterinarian or a veterinary feed directive. As a beekeeper, you should have a relationship with a veterinarian. They will be able to provide you with antibiotics when you do have a positive diagnosis for American Foulbrood and also European Foulbrood. There are 3 antibiotics approved for honeybees. We won't get into the particulars of that here. That's a little beyond the scope, but it is very important. They come in different mixes and concentrations. It is very important to apply according to the label, one, so we don't create or accelerate this resistance, and also so we don't contaminate, potentially contaminate food supply, get it into honey. There are withholding periods beyond when you finish applying, and then before any honey that would be harvested as a crop should be taken. Also with AFB, they do not work against the spores. That's why destroying infected colonies is really the only option. They just halt replication in the infected form. So I will leave it there with American Foulbrood. We kind of started with one of the, not a good one. Not that any of these are great, but we will move on to some of the
Well, Janine, that's the end of the Be Informed Partnership video. Do we have time to have any questions now, or is Dr. Nino here?
Dr. Elena Nino is here. We're very pleased to have her from University of California, Davis, UC Davis. She's the director of the Department of Entomology and Nematology. And she's been in California since 2014, and she has been very helpful for beekeepers. She really feels her responsibility to provide professional support and education to beekeepers, not just commercial beekeepers, but California backyard beekeepers like us, and pesticide applicators and veterinarians. In 2016, she began the California Master Beekeeping Program, which John and I are very happy to be part of. And she has a very long resume. She's has many publications. And I just want to thank you for being here. I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you for being here, Dr. Elena Nino.
Hi, Janine. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, you can hear me. For some reason, I'm trying to turn my video on and it looks like it's on, but then there's this weird camera thing on there, which I've never seen that before. And it looks like it is on. It tells me I can stop the video if I wanted to. So I think we'll stop stressing about video being on if you don't mind. I know you can't see me, but I am here, so you can go ahead. I know you watched the Be Informed Partnership video, so please feel free to ask any questions that you might have. I think the video covered quite a bit of important information about American Foulbrood specifically, and this is something that I've been hearing about from beekeepers ever since I've come to California. And I know there are some challenges, at least in terms of trying to, probably the biggest challenge is trying to get rid of the equipment appropriately in the bees that have been infected with American Foulbrood, considering all of the air quality restrictions and burning restrictions. So that's something that I can tell you that the Apiary board is working on updating the Apiary code for California to make it easier for beekeepers to be able to properly dispose of the equipment that has had American Foulbrood diseased bees in it. So I don't know. Tell me how you want to do this. I can just let you go ahead and ask questions. I know there's a question in the chat. It says, will a swarm move into a hive that died from AFB? I don't see the reason why not. I don't think that it's necessarily off-putting to bees. I can't guarantee it 100%, but I haven't heard otherwise. And if you guys have heard otherwise, please do let me know, but most of it probably would be anecdotal, because that's one of the concerns, is that the bees will go into, and this is one of the reasons why the apiary code in California does have a clause in there that you're not allowed to keep empty equipment outside, specifically because we don't want to have bees moving into equipment or hives that have had disease in it, and we don't want it to spread. So there are additional questions. Can a hive or a hive that has died from AF be cleaned up by wax moths? So that is a tough question, because presumably the wax moth could destroy the wax, obviously, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it would destroy spores, and it could actually potentially even spread the spores if the adults fly out and move into another colony. So wax moths, there was a suggestion, I think, by Marianne Fraser at one point up from Penn State, that she was not terribly upset about wax moths destroying, well, I shouldn't say destroying, but cleaning out her frames, because there was a concern about pesticides accumulating in wax. So wax moth going through it and destroying it, she wasn't really losing any sleep over it. But I would not rely on wax moths to clean up anything. Exactly. So could spread hives, could spread spores easily as well. Is there any way the bees can inactivate the spores? I don't know. That would be something that you'd think would have been potentially figured out by now, and the bees wouldn't necessarily be having to deal with that. I mean, they do bring in, right? They bring in the propolis, they bring in all of these antimicrobial, potentially antimicrobial compounds into the hive. So it could potentially be something that is a possibility. But as of now, I don't know of any evidence showing that the bees can inactivate the spores. Oh yeah, you already said propolis, exactly. The propolis it can't trap them. I mean, it is sticky, but I would, again, this is not something that I would rely on propolis coating to trap the spores. No.
Well, I don't mean rely on it, but it could easily be tested that if live spores were found under the propolis in a hive and the hive wasn't getting Foulbrood, that would be a sign that the bees do have that cultural defense.
Yeah, but this is so tough, because the spores really are the inside the cells, right? The spores remained when that larva dies. That's where the spores remain, within the cell. So it would be really I mean, if the bees weren't sort of picking them up, moving them to where the propolis is, or maybe using propolis to seal up these cells, that would be tough, right? Because those cells.
But the spores do get into the brood food, so they do get around.
They do. No, I absolutely do get around, as you said, but it wouldn't necessarily be.
I just said, how are you doing?
It couldn't, as you said, it couldn't get rid of all of them. It could potentially trap some. You know that the propolis is super sticky, right? And it does seem to have some antimicrobial properties. I know there's some work by Marla's group showing that there is some antimicrobial properties against, I think, American Foulbrood, non-sporulated forms. So I think I always say, hey, if you have propolis and you can promote propolis, I know it's really sticky and people don't want to deal with it, but why not if it can be beneficial?
You couldn't make me happier.
So, do you have a question, or did somebody forget to mute themselves? We can hear everything you're saying.
Sorry.
No problem. So do you have any? Oh, so hold on. I'm just going to go through the chat and sort of read. Cleaning hive tools by exposure to open flame for a certain length of time. Yes. So the fire is your friend, right? So fire is your friend. I would absolutely scorch. And that is actually something that is, I think, even in the law, right? You scorch the equipment that's not burnable with the flame. So you scorch it. And that's also why a lot of us, before we move from hive to hive, will put the hive tool inside the smoker, right, to scorch it. So we can at least minimize the transfer of potentially spores on our hive tools or just living form. And what they have done, and I've seen videos of this, New Zealand has done really a great job of trying to essentially eradicate American foulbrood from New Zealand. So they have developed a tremendous list of resources and sort of a database of resources where they're talking about all of these ways of what you should and shouldn't do and sterilizing. And essentially what they do is they will, after going through hives, they will wash them in soapy water. And I'm not saying that this is what you would do with the hive that has had American foulbrood, but after they go through the hives, they will wash it with soapy water and make sure that the hives that or the equipment that they're washing, they wash it sort of over soil, over dirt. And then they usually recommend wearing obviously gloves and booties that you can get rid of. They recommend obviously washing your protective equipment or protective gear regularly. The way we do it, and we've actually had an outbreak of American foulbrood a few years ago, which was a really good learning experience for us. We've washed all of our protective equipment on sterilization cycle in the washing machine with a lot of bleach, and we seem to have done pretty well. Ooh, I can barely keep up with the chat. Let's see. Best way to clean our hive tools between hives. So as I said, we scorch them. We usually scorch them with, what am I trying to say? The flame. We scorch it with the hot open flame, or you can scorch it inside the smoker directly. So before you close up the smoker, we'll put the hive tools inside and then we'll pump the smoker a few times. Just be careful, obviously, you don't start a fire, right? And also make sure to do that with both sides of your hive tool, as well as make sure you don't burn yourself. Inherited some boxes from an orchard, wax moth infested. Still found live larvae. They will go in empty hives for sure. Scraped, clean, and bleached. Yeah, wax moth, as far as I know, and as far as I'm familiar with this, they don't really carry any diseases that are harmful to bees that I know of that has been identified. But again, they could move stuff around. So they do go into weaker hives and they can just sort of devastate the hive, and they'll go into the hives that have been abandoned. Oh yeah, absolutely. So scraped, clean, bleached, dried in the sun. Yeah, you can, for wax moths, you can freeze, you can burn, you can smush, right? But it seems like you should have, I mean, what you've done was the right thing. Scraping, clean, bleaching, drying in the sun. Freezing, and I know this is somebody who's I'm talking as somebody who has access to several -20 deep freezers, right? Or like the chest freezers. But anytime you can freeze anything, I would recommend that, because that really does ensure that you kill everything. Freeze your frames for about 48 to 72 hours. That helps quite a bit. Disinfect gloves. What I would recommend, instead of you wearing, well, this is again depends on how would you disinfect the gloves. Bleach in water and or alcohol, right? And then wash them regularly. There's so many gloves out there that it really depends on what gloves you're using, what you can do with them. But washing regularly in hot bleach water in your washing machine would work, or doing that on, under a faucet, just having them sit there for a little while soaking. And I think I already addressed this, the suits, again, sanitize cycle, I think that's what it's called, sanitize cycle on your washing machine, and bleach. Gloves, we normally recommend you wear disposable gloves if you can. And again, I know that a lot of you probably use just regular beekeeping gloves. I wouldn't just rely on rubbing alcohol. I would definitely do a little bit more. So bleach, soap, and scorching. Anything you can scorch with high heat. Does the beekeeper act as a fomite? You potentially could, absolutely. But we all are trying to be just as careful as we possibly can. And again, we've had an outbreak. And after that outbreak, when we realized that we had American Foulbrood, we came back to the lab, and before we actually exited the vehicle, we might have gone a little overboard, but we made everybody step inside the bleach solution, right? And then all of the suits that we were wearing, we placed inside a trash bag, and again took it home, and I washed that in bleach. All of the gloves that we've used, we disposed of. All of the hive tools, we washed it. We actually let them sit in bleach water for a little while. They will start rusting though, so that's not, or don't necessarily recommend that if you forget about them, which is what happened to us. But we scorched all of it with a torch. And that's actually, I believe, what is recommended as well in the Apiary code here in California. Scorch the tops and the bottoms, because I don't think you have to actually burn the tops and the bottoms by law. A lot of the beekeepers just decide to do that anyway. What concentration of bleach? What is 10% of the bleach that you get, like Clorox, that you buy from the store. Can you let me, I'll get back to this EFB description, right, and treatments. How do you destroy an infected hive full of live bees? So this is something that we are working on right now, on how best to destroy a hive. I'm not a pest control operator, right, or a pesticide applicator. So I'm not technically able to recommend any treatments, but what we have done in the past with our own colonies, we waited until nighttime, we closed them up, and you can add soapy water. Some people have used gasoline to actually, of course, you do not want to use that as an accelerant, but we have used gasoline in the past to kill the bees inside. And usually about a cup is enough. But the important part is to close the entrance of the hive, right? So no matter what you decide to use to kill the bees, you can do that. And again, as I said, we've used in the past soapy water and gasoline, and be careful, obviously, if that's what you decide to use. I will tell you right now that the state apiary inspector is working with us on trying to figure out and get the best way to legally kill the hive, right? So it's not the legality, it's not the matter of killing the hive, it's the matter of how you kill the hive, or how do you euthanize the hive. So that's how we've done it in the past. Unfortunately, we have had in the past where we've closed up the hive, and if it's really hot outside, the bees just die because they overheat. Yeah, it doesn't kill bleach. The bleach solution alcohol do not kill the spores, because that would be totally easy solution for all of us, right? But it does, it could wash them off, and this is why I always do it sort of on this off the site of the apiary and on the ground, so the bees don't necessarily get into it. So you're just trying to minimize, in this case, you're trying to minimize the exposure to those spores as much as possible. Okay, EFB. Okay, let's go back to that. Yeah, thank you, Wendy, for sharing the New Zealand. I feel like have I missed anything? I don't think so. Okay. Okay. EFB is the European Foulbrood, which is again another Foulbrood disease. It differs from American Foulbrood in the pathogen, obviously, that causes it, and also differs in symptoms. And it can be distinguished between European Foulbrood and American Foulbrood. The spore, or it doesn't sporulate, right? So European Foulbrood larvae will start turning sort of yellowish. They then start looking really transparent, and you can see the tracheal net. And in fact, I actually have a presentation. As I was preparing for this, I was looking through my presentation. So I'm going to see if I can pop that up. I know you just sat through one of them, but let's take a look at European Foulbrood and what it looks like. Janine, I don't know if it's Wendy who's here, or Janine, if you're the one regulating the. Okay. So let me show you European Foulbrood. And then also what's common is that the European Foulbrood larvae will die with sort of this twisted up position. So the larvae look like they're trying to escape out of a cell. Can you see that European Foulbrood presentation or the slide? It is, again, it is also highly contagious. The larvae will die usually before they're capped. It doesn't form spores, and this is why antibiotics are often sufficient and effective. However, as with our American Foulbrood, there's a possibility of it developing resistance, right? Okay, let's see. It can, in the past, we've said that it's considered a stress disease. It can sometimes clear up with the flow of honey or nectar flow when it starts, but there are some, and I think I've seen Ben here on this presentation, so Ben Solomon can chime in if he has additional comments, but there are some instances in which the European Foulbrood seem to have, again, evolved, I guess, and it doesn't respond to antibiotics anymore, and it does not necessarily just easily clear up with the nectar flow, right? But we do still recommend, if you do see European Foulbrood potentially, and you diagnose it in your hives, you can buy that stick, like the little pregnancy stick, right? That you can put on some of these diseased larvae that look suspicious. You can purchase that European Foulbrood diagnostic kit, and if you determine that you have it, what we recommend is to requeen your colony with a hygienic queen if you have access to it, and then if necessary you could reach out to a veterinarian to give you an application of antibiotics. So they can prescribe that. The only antibiotic that's available and legal for use against European Foulbrood, unfortunately, is tetracycline or terramycin, right? So it's the terramycin is the one that the American Foulbrood has developed resistance. So it's a bit tricky, right? But we always say, hey, why don't you start with providing some good nutrition to your bees and requeening with a hygienic queen before you start throwing antibiotics on it, right? So hopefully you are able to see clearly the larvae, how they look. Usually when they have European Foulbrood, they're yellowish, they look sort of dry and translucent, and these are the trachea. This is the tracheal net that we're talking about. Normally you wouldn't see this in larvae, right? But you can see it here in some of these diseased larvae. And again, the larva looks like it's about to come out of the cell, and that's how they die. And important distinction between the two is if you do the rope out test, right, it will not rope out. So it doesn't rope out. It just kind of breaks as soon as you scramble the larva. It breaks. So here's the diagnostic kit that you can purchase. And I'm sure all of you here, or at least majority of you here, have probably seen this kit, or they have the American Foulbrood kit as well. There is a possibility of some false negatives. So just keep that in mind. This is why we always recommend that you use different diagnostic approaches to determining what you might have in the colony, and not just solely relying on this, but looking at the actual symptoms, right, as well. Okay, we already covered that. And here's a really nice, I think, still to this day, a pretty good comparison of the two diseases. And you can find this on extension.org that has a lot of good information from the cooperative extension with different universities putting information online there. And of course, Being Foreign Partnership obviously has quite a bit of great information too. Okay, here is the information on all of the antibiotics that are available to be used by veterinarians. And again, in reality, these are just different versions of the three of the antibiotics that were already talked about. It's oxytetracycline, lincomycin, and tylosin. Right, so those are the three. And I actually have a presentation that I'll probably pop up for you and just show you quickly so you have a better understanding of it. It is not, this is, so the presentation actually was built as a bones for a module by one of my veterinarian colleagues. So I will pop it up. It's not going to look pretty because we were working on it still, but at least it's going to give you the information. So when you're talking to your veterinarians, or if you're a veterinarian, you have that in the back of your mind. So again, terramycin is for American Foulbrood and also for European Foulbrood. And this is where people get tripped up. So it's not used, antibiotics can no longer be used as a preventative for diseases, right? For European and American Foulbrood. However, if you identify, or your veterinarian identifies Foulbrood, American Foulbrood in particular, in your colonies, you are by law obligated to burn those colonies. And then the rest of the colonies that are in the same apiary need to be checked. And if there are no symptoms of disease, you can treat them with an antibiotic as disease management. We don't call it preventative, but disease management, right? Okay. I mean, I'm not sure. Again, you already watched the presentation, so I'm not going to show you my version of the same, but if you, yep. I'll give you a second to read through this. And then this is another good resource that I would recommend you go through. It is, I think I said on a review of this as well. And you can go through it and take a look. It's pretty comprehensive. And I'm not sure if you need to be a member of like a veterinary association or anything, but do take a look at it. And again, I'm assuming that maybe some of you are veterinarians and have access to this. And we actually just developed and completed developing a course that is going to be publicly, or not publicly, but it's going to be available. It was geared specifically towards veterinarians, but we will give access to anybody who would be interested. So I can send that information when it's available. It was built as a continuing education credit for veterinarians, but we would be happy to have you guys also look through it if you'd like to. Actually, probably great idea too, if you have a veterinarian who is working with you on honeybees and helping you with honeybee diseases, you can point them in this direction as well. Of course, always like to use my kids as a prop. So let me just get that. If now I lost the chat. I don't know what's going on with me, and my Zoom prowess is not on point today. Chat, there are 5 questions, or there are at least 5 of something. So let me just quickly take a look at that. It's not popping up. Oh, let's see. Is Wendy there, or maybe Janine? I see Wendy's name, but I'm
I'm
not
here.
sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I can read them too. If you
Yeah,
want,
Wendy,
but
can you do that?
Yeah, sure. Sure, I'll read them out loud for you. Mary had a question about neighboring apiaries and
I
if
did
there are
find it.
any notification requirements and treatment requirements within a certain distance of an infected hive. That's a great question.
It's a great question, and no, there, as far as I know, there's nothing on the books that says that it's required. However, my understanding is that an apiary inspector is going to put your apiary in quarantine. And I don't know if they actually put notifications at the entrance of the apiary that there's a quarantine to that apiary. So I guess that would be one of the ways for you to know, but no, there's no requirement for notification.
I wonder, David, do you do that? Sorry for picking on you, but just wondering if you actually do that.
We haven't had to. The cases that we've had, they've been burned, immediately upon finding positive, and other hives have been treated in the area. But that is something that is done, certainly with large commercial apiaries, Central Valley and such.
Mm-hmm. David, are you an apiary inspector?
I am.
Is that why Wendy picked on you?
Yes, yeah. I'm with Humboldt County.
Excellent. Awesome. I'm so glad to see you here. That's perfect. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh,
and then, so one of the reasons, so I guess why the follow-up would be, we've worked with our own apiary inspectors in the past in the Yolo and Solano counties, and they've been super helpful with providing us with the documents stating basically that we can move apiary or move colonies, because what we've ended up doing is we didn't burn them because we weren't able to burn them and we needed to get rid of the colonies quickly. So we actually ended up sending them to a medical waste facility that was through UC Davis, and that was approved by the apiary inspectors. And I really am hoping, I don't know how much you're involved with this, but I'm hoping that that would be another option for beekeepers to be able to send their hives there. So I know you're in Humboldt, but you guys get fires too. So how easy is it to, like, I'm going to put you on the spot. So can you talk, and I'm sure you talked about this, but can you talk to everybody, especially me, about what is the process? So you have the identification of American Foulbrood, and then what do you need to do, or what does the beekeeper need to do to get the approval for burning? So specifically burning permits, because that's been the issue all along.
Right. When we dealt with several cases in, I believe it was 2017, I was able to work with the Regional Air Quality Control Board and facilitate getting burn permits. That may not be the case anymore, given recent fires, especially in 2020 and what's expected in 2021. So at this point, we don't really know, but yeah, we'll explore other avenues. That's interesting that a medical waste facility, I hadn't thought about.
So so that's, we're working on this right now with Dave Stoffel and the apiary board, right? We're kind of working on looking at alternative options. So pet crematoriums have come up, and I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to work with any of them, but I do know some beekeeping associations have done it. The gamma radiation facilities, I'd like to bring that back as an option, even though there aren't very many willing to work with beekeepers because apparently we're really dirty. It's mostly for food, right? So those, I'd love to hear any other options that people have thought of that would be able to kill off those spores, because that's really the biggest issue. Can
Yeah,
we use
and
hopefully not.
It probably work. But part of the question was, is there a recommended, in terms of neighboring hives, how far from a positive hive? Is there any recommendation for treatments in terms of, you know, if you've got a hive a quarter mile away from a positive, should you be treating your hive? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one because literally the whole thing started with the VFD, right? Because people were over treating their colonies.
Right.
And I don't know that it's still a bit of a gray area, right? I don't know that a veterinarian is going to write you a prescription. I don't know if they can by law, if you have an apiary, half a mile away, that's not your apiary, that,
right.
Yeah, I don't know. That's they didn't really think about all of these nuances when the FDA decided that we need to put this in place. So you would think that would be something that would be beneficial potentially, because the bees obviously will fly 3 miles, even more. They will rob other colonies in that vicinity. So potentially yes, but I don't know that, again, a veterinarian, when you think about all of this, all of these restrictions, I don't know if they legally can. Ooh, human crematorium. I don't know. Huh, interesting. But anyway, those are some of the options that we're considering and thinking and working on.
I've got another couple of questions if you want, or do you have the chat up? Or
I do. I don't know what happened magically, but it happened. And lactic acid bacteria, somebody just mentioned that. And did you share that document with everybody, Wendy, that you sent me earlier today?
I will. Yeah, no problem. I'll put it in the chat.
If you don't mind sharing that would
Sure.
be great. Because I think there's some information on there specifically about, let's see, lactic acid bacteria, I want to say. Let's see. Thank you for being patient, basically. Okay, so I literally am looking at the paper. I didn't get a chance to read it, but I did see it, and I thought to myself, that's interesting. And it says honeybee specific lactic acid bacterium supplements have no effect on American foulbrood infected honeybee colonies. So there is that answer. So Wendy is going to share that document with you, and you can read the paper in full.
Essentially, what we've shared in the chat with you is a pest and disease ID overview from July 2020 that Alina gave. And it is a comprehensive overview of a lot of pests and diseases, and you'll find some research articles, some video, all kinds of fun stuff that you can dive into.
Yeah, so essentially this paper says that there's no, unfortunately, beneficial effect of lactic acid bacteria supplements when you feed it to bees in hives. There were positive, or I should say there was a negative effect of these bacteria in the lab, but this is what often happens, right? In the lab, you have great results where you have controlled environment. But then you take it out in the field and it's no longer a controlled environment necessarily, and it doesn't work as well. We have not. So Janine, will a healthy colony in an apiary with AFB need to be treated more than 1 year? We have not treated it more than once. We did the treatment as prescribed by a veterinarian, and that was it, just that 1 year. And then we always, obviously, when we go through our colonies, we always keep an eye out for any of the potential symptoms of it, right? So we always keep an eye on it. Since AFB spores are viable for so long, should the apiary be moved, or is disposal, treatment, and monitoring in subsequent years demonstrated to be sufficient? That's what we've been doing for a long time, and I've been in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, both places, and now here in California. So all 3 places, what we've done, we have managed the disease as prescribed, and we have not had necessarily follow-up outbreaks after that. All right. So, however, I also have to remind people that by law, and again, we're working, some of these laws are outdated, but by law and what's recommended and what we've done, at least for sure in North Carolina, you're supposed to bury the ashes of the burned equipment, right? Like, what is it? I think it's like 2 feet or something. So we had a pit. That's how bad it was in North Carolina. We actually had a pit dedicated to burning these things, and it was pretty deep. So we just add a layer of dirt when we're done. Add another layer of dirt when we're done. So, okay. I hope you enjoyed the Be Informed Partnership video. It has a lot of good information. And now that we outed David, he's also available to answer questions. We volunteered him.
So Wendy had an interesting comment when I talked with her a week or so ago. She said that Canada and Half Moon Bay, places that are cool and moist, tend to have more outbreaks of AFB. Have you found that to be true?
So I'll tell you this. Somebody else asked, is the AFB common in North Carolina? It actually was. It was the most common. It was the state in which, while I was there, was the most common. So not so much in Pennsylvania and again, California. I've heard about outbreaks a little bit more recently, and I have a feeling that has something to do with the this new FDA rule and people running out of antibiotics potentially. But I have not, I haven't heard that necessarily. I wonder if it's maybe more moist environments could potentially trigger some of the other stressors as well, and making the bees slightly weaker overall. So that might be causing the outbreaks potentially, but don't know. It very well could be absolutely true, but I don't remember of reading anything anywhere. Unless, Wendy, if you have a source, that would be great.
I don't have a source. It's just what my experience has been. Yeah.
And there, a lot of it is, people's experiences, and it's really interesting how little is really known about the American Foulbrood in the U.S. Somebody was asking about is it common in North Carolina? From my experience, it was, and it has been. But we don't really, I don't think that we have a really good grasp on where it all is and how commonly it occurs in different areas, right? So, yeah. Yep. Perfect. John, we get questions about using equipment from other beekeepers. We do too, all the time, and we recommend not doing that. I would avoid it. I don't. If you've ever, I don't know, I feel bad because people will often contact us and say, I would love to donate equipment, but that's the policy. And we do not accept used equipment because it could just be more headache for us than anything. So if you can avoid it, avoid it. Okay. And you are more than welcome to, I think that's a pretty good resource that Wendy just shared with you, and it has a lot of great information on American Foulbrood. So just keep an eye out on the updates to the Apiary code, because I know that they are coming and they're for the best and for basically giving people more options, hopefully safe options to be able to dispose of some of these diseased equipment and tools and whatnot, bees as well. So just keep an eye on that. And as that comes up, always check the website, the Master Beekeeper website. We have great information there, and that's usually where Leah and Wendy post updates. So make sure you look there.
If I can say one thing, it's really, we didn't introduce Wendy Mather. She's the program manager for our California Master Beekeepers, and she kind of takes care of all the behind the scenes stuff and keeps us on track. So sorry, Wendy, we should have done that.
I would have done that too. Thank you, John, because none of this would be happening without Wendy and Leah too. So hopefully you'll have a chance to meet Leah one day as well. Okay. So are there any more questions? And again, if you have questions, throw them our way. One of us will hopefully get back to you. I have been short on staff. People are leaving, moving on to bigger, better things. So it might be a little bit slow, but we're definitely, it's funny. I was going from teaching a class, splitting colonies, going to check on beekeepers' hives and take samples because there's something weird going on with them, and giving a webinar. So it's been fun. Actually, I kind of like it. It's a lot of different things happening. And then working with my account manager and HR about all the other issues. So I feel well-rounded. Okay.
You get to go home to your kids.
Yeah, that's right. Oh man, that's right. They've been a handful. You saw one of them. He's 7 now, and the 6-year-old too. They're a lot of fun. They're a lot of have a lot of energy. So it's good though. How different is the dead larvae appearance in EFB compared to those in parasitic mite syndrome? The parasitic mite syndrome, from what I have seen, and I have some pretty decent images, the larvae and the pupae almost look chewed up, right? They look pretty, to me, they just, what I remember clearly when I saw it first, it was like, wow, they look chewed up. They look like the bees were trying to get rid of them and pull them out, which they probably were. So they look chewed up versus sort of shriveled up. And that's actually a really good point. We could probably put together a resource where we could compare these different diseases or symptoms or syndromes and have it just like what you saw with the extension.org. But it looks, and the dead larvae are sort of yellowish, and again, sort of transparent more than looking like they're chewed up, right? And Kelly, welcome to the first meeting. I'm excited for you. Okay. Was anybody going to ask a question?
Now, how do you keep the bellows clean on a smoker? That seems like a fomite.
Yeah, so we do wash them in, again, bleach water. For us, everything is bleach water, soapy water. We wash it off regularly. over soil. And again, the idea is the water will soak up into the soil, right? Dry off, and the bees will not be necessarily attracted to the area where they could pick up something.
Great. How would you deal with a wood deck if infected equipment was on it?
Can you say that again? Oh, the wooden deck.
Yeah.
If the equipment was on it. Whew, that's a good question. You know what my first response was going to be? Scorch it.
Oh dear.
We'd have a nice pattern, nice fancy cool artsy pattern. I mean, I probably would do the same, you know, scrub it with bleach and soapy water. There's not much else you could do. It's such a tough question, but one of the things to keep in mind now that you said that as a preventative, if you know that you have diseased equipment, yep, Dick said what I was about to say, nicer, in a nicer way, Dick. I was going to say, if you have diseased equipment, what we do, we always have on hand large trash bags, like super large trash bags. So we will put equipment if we know that we can't get to it fast enough. And that's actually probably a good recommendation anyway, even if you can't burn right away, right? Wrap it in a large trash bag. And we often recommend doing 2 or 3 trash bags around it and put it in a place where other bees wouldn't be able to get to it. So it's really just minimizing the contact of any potential disease source for other bees. So we always put them, if we think that there's something, we'll put it into large trash bags. I can't even remember how many gallons, but. And yes, we have been able to fit a super into those trash bags.
And I just want to thank you so much for attending this session with us and helping us to understand how we can cope with this problem that occurs every now and then.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you're right. It does pop up. And as I said, it's been popping up for us. And I do get phone calls and inquiries quite more often. And I mean, blessing in disguise, I guess, was that we did go through the process in our own hives. So we have firsthand experience. And again, the apiary inspectors were really wonderful. I know that you guys are overworked, but you were really essential for us to be able to deal with this. So thank you.
And we're getting lots of thank yous in the chat column.
Thank you, everyone.
Beekeepers.
We want to thank you for your responsibility in reaching out and asking about American Foulbrood and wanting to know how to deal with it in a proper manner and having the conversation. Many folks don't like talking about it. There's a certain element of secrecy behind it, right? So this is something that really needs to be discussed out in the open, and we need to educate one another about it. So thanks for showing up.
Yeah, and Eric, I totally agree. We always talk about having a plan, and I think we started at one point working on a document, sort of a chart, and things just happen and come up, and it was never fully completed. There are bones of it, and the idea was to have sort of a flow chart of what happens once you identify the American Foulbrood in your colonies, notifying the apiary inspectors what they will do, and then working with your veterinarian. So that is where we started working on it, right? So, and I think I actually sent the message to Cheryl, sorry, Cheryl, instead of to everybody, saying, Eric, I completely agree. So we do have the bones of it. And you know what? I mean, if any of you might be interested, maybe, and again, I don't want to put David on the spot, but any of you, I would be happy to share that document, maybe even with some of our master beekeepers. And if they can work on it from where we have started and build on it, I think it would be a great resource. for everybody. And again, it will absolutely depend on your own personal situation, but at least it will give you some options.
Let's do that. Fabulous idea. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Janine and Wendy, of course, for always being there, and John and everybody else who I know and don't know. I can't, there are a lot of you. This is great. I'm so glad there were so many of you here.
Let's give a thanks.
Thank you. I love it. I love the excitement. Don't we have
Thank
like
you.
the
Thank
little
you.
reactions, right? Very good. The little reaction, I think. Hopefully that works. Great. Have a great evening, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Have a
Bye.
good night. Say hi to the kids.
I will. Thanks, Janine. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was really wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful, Janine, for you helping make this
Yes,
arrangement
thank
happen.
you for putting all that together, Janine.
That was
Turned
excellent.
out really well.
Well,
Good night, Eric.
everybody's been so responsive. I mean, I think that they understand this is something we need to know.
Uh-huh. And we had a pretty good turnout. There were 40 people here at one point.
Yay.
That's good.
Yeah,
One
for
of
me,
the things
I
that
don't
I
have
would,
I don't have
I want people to appreciate is Wendy's comment about like almost public shaming of people who might actually have this in their apiary. It's a sad situation. I feel bad that people don't talk about it.
Oh, it must be devastating.
Personally, it makes me think of what my mom used to say. It's not a crime to get lice. It's a crime to keep them.
Definitely.
What are you saying, Janine?
You don't want to go around sharing your lice with all your friends.
Okay.
Get rid of them.
No, I agree. I agree. I think it's, I think we tend to kind of not want to share that information when that's the first thing we ought to be sharing, because it's going to impact every beekeeper around you. And that happened a few years ago when that happened, that went out. The person that had them finally put it on Facebook, and I thought that took a lot of courage to do it, but that let people know in the area they needed to check real close.
Yeah.
But I think that perhaps a little anonymity, anonymous.
Anonymity.
Yes, that's the word I was trying to say. Maybe good, but we do need to work together to help one another when there's these issues. I mean, it's not only physically challenging, it's emotionally devastating.
Yeah.
Because how many of us, really think of our colonies as kind of an extension of our family?
I think most of us.
Right. So you lose a family member to a terrible disease that, they can't recover from. And you have
Or how about thousands of family members?
Right. Yeah, that's tough. Besides all of your equipment.
Well, what I found most interesting was I didn't know that this was something that had to be reported, and I didn't know what it looked like. So now I know both, that it has to be reported and what it looks like. So yeah, and it'd be easier to respond more quickly to something and keep it limited to one hive before it spreads around if it's a mystery. So these meetings have been super informative for the newbies like me, so I appreciate it.
Well, good. Thank you.
And I have no personal filters, so if I've got a disease, I'll tell you guys about it.
Yeah,
Well,
me too. No filter here. I have a question. Were we going to talk about the small hive beetle or not? Because it was mentioned.
Do you want to do your little slideshow on?
Yeah, I can get that up and do it.
That's a good
I
one.
assume I can do a share screen here.
Yes.
So let me get that up. Hold on a second.
I was thinking about getting some packaged bees from Georgia from the Fat Bee Man and then I started thinking about the small hive beetle and how there was already an instance here in Humboldt County with them. And I was kind of like, I don't want to be the perpetrator of that. And so I was wondering if David already answered my questions about them, you know, that they could possibly be in packages. So, you know, like I
And
said,
also coming from
I don't want to be the bringer inner of pests.
Thank you.
Also coming from Georgia, they might not be alive when they get here.
Yeah, that's definitely another consideration.
I also think you have the Africanized bee possibility,
In Georgia?
possibly from Georgia. So I would encourage anybody buying bees, buy them from Northern California. I mean, this whole hive beetle thing came about because somebody bought packages from, you know, Southern California, and boy, hopefully they'll get a foothold.
So the hive beetle did come up here, did come from Southern California?
I think they came with some nukes from Southern California.
Yes.
Yeah, Africanized bees are definitely in Georgia. And in fact, somebody was stung to death last year from Africanized bees.
I got to run. I'll see you guys next month.
Okay,
All right,
Josh.
Josh.
See you later.
Thanks.
Just go through some of the slides here. So it's a pretty distinct, very smooth, rounded. When its head is tucked, it just looks like one solid piece.
Yeah.
Very tiny.
Oh,
Yeah. So good.
small hive beetle.
Very.
Ooh.
There is a large hive beetle, but we don't have it.
I think my next, yeah. So there's the large hive beetle.
Where is it located?
I don't think that's anywhere in North America. I think that's strictly in Africa, but that's why there is small hive beetle. So wax moth larvae, small hive beetle larvae. So you have the spines on the back is probably the best. They talk about the prolegs on the bottom. It's not as evident, but the spines on the back of the larvae are more so.
Do they get in the wax just like the wax moth when they go into the where the pollen is, and they get down and around the edges and they go all down through the wax? Is that what the small hive beetle does too?
I don't know if they so much burrow in the wax. I think they're more in the honey.
Oh.
I don't think they so much tunnel in the wax. So this is a pretty bad infection. This is a really, really bad infection.
That would make me throw up.
Does it smell bad or anything?
What we saw were only a few adults, so I don't have experience, thankfully, in dealing with anything to that level. But I would imagine the honey is badly fermenting and it probably smells.
It does cause fermented honey.
Yeah.
I got to see some in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And then this particular one is what our department got. These are little traps you fill with oil and they're put in the hives. The entries to the traps are too small for the bees to get into, but the bees will kind of herd the beetles, and the beetles will seek tight spaces that the bees can't get into, and so they fall into the oil and die. You just use normal vegetable oil. You just need to be careful that you don't spill any oil on your bees, but you can just put those in and leave them in as a monitoring trap. And when you're checking frames, just pull up the trap and take a look at it and see if there's anything in it.
So presumably those fit between the frames and still allow for a no greater bee space.
Right.
I mean, you wouldn't want I wouldn't want my frames pushed out to where it was causing burr comb and stuff. So it just fits right in there.
No, they're very slender. So this is just the life cycle. So the larvae, if you look down here, the larvae leave the hive, drop to the ground, burrow, go through metamorphosis, and emerge as adults that can then reinfect hives or fly off.
And didn't you tell us that when they drop to the ground, they burrow into the ground very quickly?
From what I was able to find, yeah, quite. They're underground quite quickly.
That's what I heard on a couple of the Facebook chats I belong to from like the Fat Bee Man group in Georgia and stuff like that, is they propagate, or not, that's the wrong word because they're not plants, but I mean they proliferate or whatever they do in the soil around the hives. And
right.
I don't know what the cure is for that. I don't know if diatomaceous earth helps. I don't know. I have no idea. I guess if it helped, they would probably be doing that and not have them in their hives. I don't know.
Well, there are approved ground treatment insecticides. There's one in hive treatment that's it's a mite treatment, but it also is strong enough to work for the hive beetle. And there's a couple of ground drench insecticides that are used.
What's the in-hive treatment that works for mites too?
Oh, what is that?
I think it's Kumafos, isn't it? Checkmite too?
Yes, checkmite.
Checkmite?
Checkmite.
Do you guys happen to know off the top of your head if that's good with honey supers on?
I don't think it is. I don't think you want to use it in your hive at all if you can help it.
Yeah.
It's pretty strong stuff. I probably not best to be using that just for mite treatment.
Okay.
So that just getting into website, but yeah, so we haven't had any more reports. The weather's warmed up and we're not seeing, we have people still monitoring their hives near where the find was last fall. Haven't heard anything. So hopefully if we get through the year, I'll feel much better, but hopefully we nipped it in the bud.
I was gonna say our winters are so darn mild. That would be scary because like I don't know, just from what I've seen on the interwebs and the weather station and stuff like that, it could get pretty freaking cold in some of those states that those hive beetles come from compared to us.
Yeah, they've established very well in like Southern California and parts of the Central Valley and some of the southern states, but they're not found further north. So
yeah,
well, true. But I don't know what that kind of says about our winters are mild, but our summer's not hot enough here. And it's originally South African, so, hotter, drier climate there. But, it's going to move around with commerce, unfortunately.
Right.
Cheryl, do you have a question?
I was just going to mention a friend of mine teaches beekeeping classes down in Long Beach, and somebody from Northern Oregon took her class, and for some reason she bought a packaged beehive from down there and was going to bring it up to Northern Oregon, and I just kind of told her that wasn't a good idea, but because she asked. But I just that made me think of that, and I wanted to mention it.
Thank you, Cheryl.
I don't think I'll be ordering my bees from Georgia. I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, bees are bees, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Nothing special about Georgia bees.
For sure.
I got a question for David. about the small hive beetle, and I talked to some of the queen people out in the valley. It seems there's two ways to look at it, and about something that's a invasive problem like this. And one way is that when it gets here, it's going to be established and going to be a problem. So our approach is to keep it out, put up barriers, jump on it right away, like you guys have been doing. The other, which was expressed by, in some places that's for some diseases, that's the way it goes. And then there's the queen people or one of them had the other idea that if they could live here, they already would be. He says in Northern California, they see them occasionally, but they don't really establish and become a problem because of climatic or other. And so I wonder if you have an opinion on one or the other of those, or whether that's just wait and see for here.
Yeah, whenever I hear well, if they could survive here, they'd already be here argument, it always kind of worries me, because we deal with a lot of, not beyond bees, invasive weeds and forest insect pests and the like, and things can surprise you in where they will and won't establish. I would not take that bet. The fact that it has established well in Southern and Central California and not in Northern California does seem to indicate there's some barrier to their establishment. As to what that is, probably climatic, but not really sure. But I think for the interim, if we can encourage people to not buy bees from areas that are infested already, to be vigilant. If we can keep it out, it's one less problem that you guys need to deal with.
I also heard the opinion that was based on experience that it can be in an area at a very low level for 2 or 3 years and then all of a sudden blow up. So the fact that they don't see them very often may not be worth counting on.
Maybe they're down in the soil.
Well, couldn't it also just be numbers? There's a lot more hives and a lot more movement in the valley.
Yeah, sometimes there's a weak spot in a reproductive cycle where they'd survive just fine, like if they get imported, but then they have a tough spot at a certain point in reproduction. And sometimes that depends on numbers, like bees. If there's not many drones around, they have a hard time mating properly, but once there's a lot of them, then they can do a lot better. And so there could be some population threshold effect with beetles or anything.
It also could have to do with climate too, and if there are changes, it could give beetles more of an opportunity to take hold here. So I think we do need to stay vigilant.
Absolutely.
They certainly live in places that get a lot colder.
Yeah.
How many folks have put traps in their hives just to monitor? Does anyone have the oil traps going? I got some of those. I'm just curious.
In addition to where it was found, we were monitoring, I think, 4 other sites in the fall.
And I've got to admit that I have some oil traps, and I've just been trying to get through making the splits and then put them back in.
But did you find any beetles?
No, not yet. But am I going to watch for them? Yes.
Yeah, I would guess that between oil traps and observing, that observing might be more effective, especially if you look immediately after you take the lid off and see if there were any corralled under the lid, and on the bottom board if you're taking boxes off, because they tend to let go and fall to the bottom. And they can fall through a screened bottom board. They're small enough to do that.
Oh.
And that's where we saw, tended to see them when we were inspecting this this bee yard. Because as you take the work through the boxes up, they'll sort of drop down and accumulate down the bottom.
Also, they have a preference for weak hives.
Yeah.
Like colonies.
So really train your eye and look at those clubbed antennas, because you see a lot of beetles on the bottom board that are scavenging this and that, and they can look very similar, but they certainly don't look the same.
Clubbed antennas.
The main speaker is finished. They're just chatting still.
So they can fall through a screened bottom board.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry to keep it going, but last night I had to run the fan for an hour because it was so hot upstairs. I was a little reluctant to shovel it in.
David, do we keep the oil traps in the hive all year round? Is that the recommendation?
We weren't keeping them in during the winter.
Right, I took mine out.
Yeah, but now, if you wanted to continue to monitor, that would be a good time to have them in.
Okay.
And just.
Okay. And if I remember correctly, the last time you were here at our meeting, you made a comment that, if I'm remembering correctly, to put it in the top box would be okay? Or do you want it inside in the middle of the hive? What would be better?
Where there's more activity is better, but you also have to be cautious about, you don't want to spill, even though it's just vegetable oil, you don't want to be spilling it. So having it, someplace where it's easier access without tipping it at all. Okay. And there seemed to be some, there was some information that I saw online, because of the way the bees herd the beetles, that it may be better towards the edges, but others said, no, it's better where there's more activity. So it's,
Okay.
Don't know what to believe, basically.
All right. Thank you. Well, does anybody else have more questions? Do we have any questions? Maybe that's a better question to ask.
Tony.
Hi, Tony. Well, if we don't have any questions, I guess I'll just pitch my request to please join if you're not already a member, so you can vote next month for our elections, and to consider adding your name or opinion for officers for president. We need to have some good people involved. Absolutely. We do already have very many good, dedicated people that are involved, hardworking, and we just need more people.
I have an opinion.
Tell me, Cheryl.
Well, he's not here right now, but I thought Eric Christensen would make a good president. And I said that means you, Eric, and all he said was,
I also have posed that question to him in person twice.
Oh, have you? Good. And what did he say?
He's not saying no.
Okay. Yeah, that was my thought.
He's a busy man. He works hard every day. So
yeah.
Like many people do. So are there any new beekeeper bee questions? This is usually the time when we have, I guess we don't have very many people, 14 people left.
I think we lost all of our beginners.
Okay.
No, I'm here, but I don't have enough information to ask anything right now. It's like I don't know what I don't know or something. I'll ask next time.
How long have you been keeping bees, Mary?
A year. So I'm getting through my
Good.
first splits and requeening, and I didn't see what I was expecting to see last weekend, so I'm going to look again this weekend, and then I'll call Janine.
Okay.
It's nice to have somebody to call.
Yeah, watch out, Janine. I got to sign off, but it's been a great meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
How about you, Matt? How long have you been keeping bees?
Oh, he's gone.
You're muted, Matt.
About 2.5 years. Right after I got off of work, my probation, my wife said, well, you know, once you pass probation, you can start. And she was thinking I was going to start the following year or something. What she didn't know is I knew some people at work that kept bees. I already had boxes and equipment. And I ran over to Justin and I got a package. And the very next day I was a beekeeper. He's like,
There
what?
you go. There you go.
So I've been keeping them ever since. I've had, you know, mixed results. I've caught a swarm. I've done a split. I've had a hive collapse and combined it with another hive. I've had a queen fail. This year, produced a queen, but she's a virgin queen, couldn't get any brood. And another one was an old queen and she stopped producing. So I've combined those. And just this afternoon, put another queen in the combined hive. I'm going to try to revive what's left. Got a package that is just blowing up. It's doing great. So I'm hopeful to have 2 hives this year, but maybe more next year. But I learned something about my wife. This is kind of exciting. She had no interest in beekeeping whatsoever, but she's got the eye. You know, the people that can spot the queen in about 3 seconds. You know, I've spent hours flipping them over, going back the next day. Excuse me, I got to take another look. And next day, no, I just say, come out here, come out here, come here. Okay, where's the queen? No, no, there she is. All right, thank you. You know, saves so much time and gets me right to where I need to do. So, you know, it's a handy thing. I think I'm working to get her into beekeeping. I started painting all the hives purple because that's her favorite color, and she's on to me, but she's saying, well, it might work, you know. So we'll see how it works out.
Good.
That's funny. That's funny.
Well, I'm at the end of my broadcast day. I started about 5 this morning and I got an early day tomorrow. I got meetings, so I'm going to let everybody go. It's been super informative. Thank you, David. Very helpful. Very, very helpful. Every meeting I'm getting a little bit better. So.
And thank you, Matthew. That was a great story. I loved it.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Well, it's 8:09, and I suppose if we don't have any more stories to tell, I mean, I'm willing to stay for a while, but if anybody has any more stories, speak now or forever hold your peace until next June. Otherwise, we could say thank you to David since he's here, and Janine and John. Very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. It was a good meeting. Very good meeting.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I hope everybody will come back next month to see John's bee anatomy lecture. Okay. Good night. Happy beekeeping for the rest of the month.
Good night.
Adios.
Adios.
Tina, I see you just came in. The meeting is over now. Oh, and she's still connecting to audio.
Cheryl, what kind of moth is that you have on your picture?
That's a sphinx moth.
That's really beautiful. I didn't realize.
Janine Caprelli.
Hi, Tina, can you unmute yourself? I don't know.
I just, I had to, can I help?
The meeting is over now, Tina. Everybody's leaving.
Okay, I just, I had to go give my daughter a ride on the hood, so I tried to make sure it was getting over. All right,
I
thank
see.
you.
No, I'm sorry. That's okay. I hope you can make it next month. We're having a presentation next month.
Oh, I got to see,
Yeah, I saw you
got
were
to
here
see
earlier.
a huge portion of it. I just,
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw you were
Okay,
here
thank you.
earlier.
Is Janine still there?
No, she's not. Just you and I, and there's someone that's on the phone, and I don't know who that is. But our next presentation is going to be on bee anatomy and physiology next month. Okay, bye.